In a chilling broad daylight attack, Officer Derek Hansen violently assaults Monique Taylor, a pregnant black woman. Kicking her in the street as cameras roll, the public erupts, but the police department launches a vicious smear campaign against Monique and her husband, Marcus. They underestimated Marcus, a former black hat military operative. His revenge isn't physical, but a calculated digital strike that dismantles their corrupt system, exposing a deep network of lies and bringing justice from the shadows. This is not just a fight for one family, it's a war for truth against institutional power. Monique Taylor clutched her swollen belly, navigating the bustling sidewalk. The afternoon sun beat down on downtown. Reflecting off glass towers, she moved with a pregnant woman's deliberate slowness, a hand instinctively resting over her unborn child. A quick stop at the pharmacy, then home to Marcus. Simple plan. The blare of a siren ripped through the urban din. A patrol car screeched to a halt beside a double-parked delivery van, lights flashing. Officer Derek Hansen emerged, a hulking figure in blue, his face a mask of simmering impatience. He moved like a man perpetually annoyed, his gaze sweeping the street with an almost predatory intensity. Hansen spotted Monique attempting to cross the intersection. The pedestrian signal glowed red. She hesitated, her focus on a sudden twinge in her lower back. Hansen's eyes narrowed. "Hey, you stay on the curb," he barked, his voice cutting through the street noise. Monique flinched, startled, and took a cautious step back. "I was just trying to," she started, but Hansen wasn't listening. He strode toward her, his boots thudding on the pavement. Passers-by slowed, some pulling out phones, their expressions shifting from curiosity to concern. This wasn't a routine stop. "You deaf or just think the law doesn't apply to you?" Hansen sneered. Stepping closer, his presence felt massive, suffocating. Monique's heart pounded. "Sir, I didn't hear you," she managed, her voice trembling slightly. Her pregnancy made her feel vulnerable, exposed. The officer's gaze dropped to her belly, a flicker of something dark crossing his features. "Playing dumb and pregnant, real convenient," he scoffed, a sneer twisting his lips. "Obstruction of traffic, resisting a lawful order. You want to argue with an officer?" Before Monique could react, Hansen reached out, his hand clamping onto her arm with unexpected force. "Let's go. We'll sort this out at the precinct." Panic flared. "No, you can't," Monique cried, instinctively pulling away. The sudden movement, the pain in her arm, the shock of his grip, it was too much. She stumbled, her balance compromised by her advanced pregnancy. Hansen yanked harder, pulling her off the curb. Her foot slipped on a loose grate. She cried out, a sharp, involuntary sound. The officer, instead of steadying her, seemed to interpret her struggle as active resistance. His grip tightened, and he used his momentum to spin her. Monique lost her footing entirely, falling heavily to the asphalt. A collective gasp rose from the onlookers. She landed on her side, a searing pain erupting in her hip and radiating to her abdomen. Her breath caught. The world spun. Then, a sickening thud. Hansen's boot connected with her side. A deliberate, brutal kick. Not a stumble, not an accident. A calculated blow. Monique screamed, a raw sound of pure agony. The pain was immediate, blinding. She curled protectively around her belly, tears streaming down her face. "My baby. Oh God, my baby," she choked out. The crowd erupted. Shouts of "Hey, and what are you doing?" filled the air. Several phones were now aimed squarely at the scene, recording every horrifying detail. Hansen, momentarily stunned by the public outcry, hesitated, his face flushing crimson. He looked down at Monique, still writhing on the ground, then glared at the growing circle of witnesses. "Move along, official police business," he roared, but his voice lacked conviction. A man in a business suit, phone held high, stepped forward. "This is not official business. This is assault. You just kicked a pregnant woman," he yelled. Other voices joined in, a chorus of outrage. Hansen's partner, who had been speaking into his radio by the patrol car, rushed over, his eyes wide with disbelief and alarm. He saw Monique on the ground, heard her cries, saw the furious faces of the crowd. This was going to be a disaster. Monique pushed herself up weakly, her hand still pressed to her side, a damp patch spreading on her shirt. Her eyes, filled with pain and defiance, met Hanson's. "You will pay for this," she whispered, her voice hoarse, but laced with an unexpected steel. The crowd surged forward slightly, creating a barrier between Monique and the officer. The digital lenses of a dozen phones glowed, capturing the raw aftermath. Hanson stood isolated, his earlier bravado replaced by a simmering fury that threatened to boil over. The public square, moments ago a place of mundane routine, had transformed into an arena of raw injustice. The silence that followed Monique's pained words was heavier than any shout. The video evidence was already being uploaded. Monique Taylor's hands instinctively cradled her advanced pregnancy as she navigated the crowded downtown street. The afternoon sun beat down, turning the pavement into a shimmering canvas. A quick stop at the pharmacy, then home. Simple. The sudden blare of a siren shattered the urban hum. A patrol car, lights flashing, screeched to a halt, boxing in a double-parked delivery truck. Officer Derek Hanson emerged. A physical force in his uniform, his face a hard mask of control and impatience. His eyes, cold and assessing, swept the sidewalk. Hanson spotted Monique attempting to cross the intersection. The pedestrian signal cycled to red. She paused, a hand pressing to her side, a sharp twinge in her lower back. Hanson's gaze locked on her, on the curb. Now he bellowed, his voice raw, cutting through the city's drone. Monique flinched, startled, taking a step back. "Sir, I was just," she began, but Hanson was already closing the distance. Passers-by slowed, a palpable tension rising in the air. Phones emerged from pockets and purses. "Aimed, you hard of hearing, or just above the law," Hanson sneered, his shadow falling over her. His presence was overwhelming, confrontational. Monique's pulse hammered. "Officer, I didn't hear your command," she stated, her voice tight, a tremor she fought to control. Her pregnancy made her feel exposed, vulnerable. Hanson's eyes dropped to her belly, a flicker of something ugly crossing his features. "Right. And the pregnant act, real original. Obstruction. Resisting. Let's go." Without warning, Hanson's hand clamped onto her arm, a grip of surprising brutality. "You're coming with me," Monique cried out, a sharp, involuntary sound. The pain shot through her, coupled with the shock of his aggression. She instinctively pulled away, her body twisting, her balance, already precarious with her advanced state, failed her. She stumbled violently. Hanson, interpreting her recoil as defiance, yanked harder. Monique pitched forward, her foot catching on a grate, sending her sprawling onto the unforgiving asphalt. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. She landed hard on her side, a searing agony erupting in her hip and abdomen. Then a sickening impact. Hanson's heavy boot, deliberate and unyielding, connected with her side. A precise, brutal kick. Monique screamed, a raw, primal sound torn from her throat. Tears instantly blurred her vision as she curled instinctively, desperately, around her unborn child. My baby. Oh God, my baby. She choked, her voice a ragged whisper of pure terror. The crowd erupted. "Hey, what the hell was that?" a man roared. "You kicked her," a woman screamed. A dozen phone screens glowed, capturing the horror unfolding. Hanson, momentarily caught off guard by the sheer volume of public outrage, froze. His face burned crimson. He glared at the circle of furious witnesses. "Back off, police business," he bellowed. But his authority was crumbling. His partner, who had been radioing from the patrol car, sprinted over, his face pale with shock. He saw Monique writhing on the ground, heard the furious cries, saw the cameras. This was beyond bad. Monique pushed herself up, trembling, her hand pressed to her side where a damp patch was rapidly spreading. Her eyes, filled with pain but burning with an icy resolve, locked onto Hanson's. "You will pay," she hissed, each word a venomous promise. The crowd surged, a protective wave between Monique and the officer. The digital lenses of every phone focused, unblinking, capturing the raw, explosive aftermath. Hanson stood isolated, his bravado replaced by a dawning realization of the catastrophe he had unleashed. The once mundane street had become a stage for brutal injustice, and the world was watching. The raw footage, already streaming, guaranteed it. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of angry shouts and flashing phones. The crowd surged forward, creating a protective human shield around Monique. Several hands reached out, helping her to a seated position on a nearby bench. "Are you okay? Is the baby okay?" A woman's voice, laced with frantic concern, cut through the din. Monique, still gasping for air, nodded weakly, clutching her belly, her eyes wide with lingering shock. The damp patch on her shirt was spreading, a dark stain that intensified the fear. Officer Hanson, momentarily stunned by the public uprising, snarled at his partner, "Get them back. This is police obstruction." His partner, a younger, visibly shaken officer named Miller, hesitated, his gaze darting between the furious crowd and the still crying Monique. "Sir, they've got it all on video," Miller mumbled, his voice tight. "We need to call it in." Just then, a sleek, black sedan screeched to a halt at the edge of the chaotic scene. The driver's door burst open. Marcus Taylor, Monique's husband, exploded from the car. He was a man of controlled power, his frame lean and deceptively strong. His eyes, usually warm, were now shards of ice as they swept the scene, taking in Monique on the bench, the furious crowd, and the two officers. His gaze landed on Hanson, who stood rigidly, defiance warring with a nascent unease. Monique Marcus's voice was a low growl, devoid of its usual calm. He pushed through the periphery of the crowd, his movements fluid, efficient. He knelt beside Monique, his hand immediately going to her belly, then tracing the outline of the spreading dampness. His jaw clenched. "What happened?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. A chorus of voices erupted, eager to recount the horror. "That officer, he kicked her while she was on the ground," a woman cried. "He just threw her down," another added. Marcus's eyes, dark and turbulent, lifted to Hanson. "You did this?" he asked, his voice barely audible, yet it cut through the noise like a honed blade. Hanson, regaining some of his bravado, stepped forward. "She resisted arrest, obstructed an officer," he barked, pointing a finger at Monique. "You want to take this up with me?" Tough guy, Marcus slowly rose to his full height. He didn't speak. Instead, his right hand moved, a blur of motion. In a split second, a small black device, no larger than a credit card, materialized between his fingers. It was so fast, so precise, that few caught the movement. He held it up. "This is a frequency jammer," Marcus stated, his voice now clear, resonant, and utterly devoid of emotion. "Military grade, encrypted. It's currently broadcasting on the specific frequencies used by your squad car's internal communication system. Your body cam and your radio, right now. Neither of you can send or receive data or record anything." Hanson's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock crossing his face. Miller visibly paled. They instinctively reached for their radios, their body cams. Nothing. Silence. The crowd, initially confused, began to murmur, sensing the shift in dynamics. And this, Marcus continued, his left hand rising, displaying a small, cylindrical object. "This is a directional EMP, highly focused, capable of rendering any digital recording device within 5 meters useless. Don't worry, it's not active. Yet." He looked directly at Hanson, his gaze unwavering. "But your body camera footage, I've already accessed it, live streamed, and I've secured the original data stream from your car's dash cam through a back channel. Your digital footprint, Officer Hanson, is now public domain. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. This wasn't just a man. This was an operator, a ghost in the machine. Hansen, for the first time, looked truly rattled. His chest heaved. He had seen ex-military before, but never one with this specific, unnerving skill set. This wasn't a street fight. This was a digital ambush. Marcus took a step forward, the small black device still held aloft. My wife is a pregnant black woman. She was assaulted, publicly, by you, and you just attempted to erase the evidence. What happens next, officer? Depends entirely on how quickly you understand that I am not just her husband. I was a SIGINT operative, a black hat during my service. I built, deployed, and exploited these systems. You just kicked the wrong woman, and I just showed you the tip of the iceberg. He lowered his hands, but the subtle shift in power was palpable. Hansen was no longer in control. His aggressive posture deflated. His eyes flickered nervously to the unblinking phones of the crowd. The silent, digital war Marcus had just declared left Hansen exposed and vulnerable in a way he had never experienced. The street, moments ago his stage for brutality, had become his trap. Marcus's calm, precise words had rendered him powerless. The fallout from Marcus's public demonstration was immediate and brutal. Within minutes, the street was swarming with patrolers, not to arrest Hansen, but to contain the burgeoning crowd and, more pointedly, to apprehend Marcus. They arrived with a swift, tactical precision that suggested high-level orders. Hansen, shaken but regaining his composure, pointed directly at Marcus. That man assaulted an officer, he's resisting arrest, and he just deployed an unauthorized device. The accusations were baseless, but the message was clear. Silence the threat. Marcus, however, was already moving. He handed Monique a small, innocuous-looking USB drive. Everything. The raw feed. Give it to the lawyer, the journalist, anyone you trust. Do not let them touch it. His eyes met hers, a silent, urgent communication passing between them. Then, as officers closed in, he offered no resistance. He went limp, a dead weight, making their attempt to control him awkward in public. He simply let himself be cuffed, his gaze never leaving Monique until he was shoved into the back of a squad car. He knew the fight had just begun. Monique was rushed to the nearest hospital. The pain in her side persisted, a dull ache that flared with every movement. Doctors performed a battery of tests, their faces grim. The baby was stable, miraculously. But Monique had sustained internal bruising and a severe hip injury. The kick had been powerful, aimed with malevolent intent. While she lay in the sterile white room, the news exploded. The raw, unfiltered video of Hansen's attack went viral, an uncontrollable wildfire across every social media platform. The image of his boot connecting with her pregnant body became a symbol of unchecked police brutality. But the police department, reeling from the public relations nightmare, immediately launched a counteroffensive. They issued a statement condemning the isolated incident and promised a full investigation, while simultaneously painting Monique as a disruptive individual with a history of non-compliance. Then came the legal blow. Marcus was charged with assaulting a police officer, obstruction, and illegal use of electronic devices. The charges were absurd, designed to bury him in legal battles and discredit his testimony. They even tried to imply his military-grade devices were terrorist tools. Monique, still in pain, received a visit from two detectives. They were polite, almost too polite, their questions loaded. Mrs. Taylor, can you confirm that your husband was in possession of these, devices? Did he instruct you to conceal anything? They framed her as complicit, as a witness to a crime, not a victim of one. Their thinly veiled threats hinted at further charges if she didn't cooperate. It was psychological warfare, designed to break her, to make her denounce Marcus and retract her story. The hospital became a battleground of wills. A human rights lawyer, contacted by the frantic civilian who had helped Monique earlier, arrived like a storm. He was a seasoned veteran, known for battling systemic corruption. He brought a phalanx of investigative journalists, eager for the full story. Monique, despite her pain, held her ground. She recounted every detail, her voice clear and unwavering, refusing to be intimidated. She produced the USB drive Marcus had given her, the physical proof of his foresight, his strategic genius. The department's next move was insidious. While the public outcry reached a fever pitch, they began a smear campaign against Marcus. Old, grainy surveillance footage of him from a previous, unrelated protest, a peaceful demonstration against racial profiling, was leaked, heavily edited to make him appear aggressive. Anonymous sources, supposedly former military colleagues, revealed his past as a troubled, unstable operative discharged under cloudy circumstances. They tried to paint him as a dangerous, anti-establishment radical, using Monique's attack as an excuse for his pre-planned assault on law enforcement. The goal was to pivot the narrative. It wasn't about a racist cop, but a dangerous radical manipulating his pregnant wife. Monique felt the walls closing in. The media, while initially sympathetic, began to pick up on the police department's narrative, questioning Marcus's motives, his background. Her personal tragedy was being twisted into a political weapon. She saw her husband's face on the news, his image tainted by false accusations. This wasn't just injustice, it was an attempt to erase their truth, to demonize the victim and the one man fighting for her. The physical pain was nothing compared to the agony of watching them dismantle Marcus's reputation, piece by calculated piece. The betrayal cut deeper than any kick. She was being pushed to the edge, not by a single act of violence, but by a relentless, systemic assault on their very existence. The justice system, meant to protect, was being weaponized against them, turning their fight into a desperate struggle for survival. She felt a profound loneliness, a sense of being isolated in a sea of official lies. The sterile hospital room felt like a cage, not a sanctuary. Every news report, every online headline, was a fresh wound. The police narrative, carefully crafted, was insidious. Marcus, the dangerous radical, exploiting his pregnant wife's incident. Monique saw his face, distorted, villainized. Her anger, cold and sharp, cut through the physical pain. They weren't just trying to imprison him, they were trying to erase his truth. This wasn't just about justice for her, it was about protecting Marcus, protecting their family, protecting the truth. She would not break. The human rights lawyer, Miss Anya Sharma, sat opposite Monique, her face etched with frustration. They're good. Monique, their smear campaign is systematic. We have the video, but they've polluted the well so thoroughly that people are starting to question everything. The investigative journalist, a sharp-eyed woman named Chloe Davis, nodded, her notebook lying open but unused. Every network, every online forum, it's flooded with Marcus Taylor, ex-military extremist. We need something undeniable, something that exposes their operation, not just a single incident. Monique closed her eyes, picturing Marcus's calm face as he had handed her the USB, the subtle strength in his eyes. He had prepared for this, for their corruption. He had told her to trust anyone she trusted. She remembered his words, "My wife is a pregnant black woman. She was assaulted publicly by you, and you just attempted to erase the evidence." He knew. He always knew. Then came the anonymous message. It wasn't to the lawyer's official channels or the journalist's public email. It was a cryptic, untraceable message sent through an encrypted dark web forum that Marcus had once mentioned, a place for whistleblowers and digital dissidents. Monique, remembering his offhand comments about secure drops, had found it after hours of painstaking searching. Guided by a hunch, the message was short: Officer Hansen's internal file, department memo on narrative control, contact through dead drop, verify with Onyx. The recipient was an unlikely ally, Officer Miller, Hansen's young, visibly shaken partner. He had seen the kick, seen the crowd's outrage. and the sheer audacity of Hansen's subsequent smear campaign had sickened him. He was tired of being a cog in a corrupt machine, especially after he witnessed Hansen's blatant disregard for life. He had been quietly observing the public outcry and Marcus's strategic counter. He saw the video, saw Monique's pain. He didn't know Marcus, but he knew the truth of what he had witnessed. He knew Hansen was rotten. Miller, acting on a crisis of conscience and a vague fear for his own future, had accessed the department's restricted server. He wasn't a hacker like Marcus, but he knew the backdoor protocols for internal communications, especially during a media crisis. He had downloaded the files, carefully, secretly. He then reached out via the encrypted forum, knowing Marcus, or someone connected to him, might monitor such channels. He didn't want to contact the lawyer or journalist directly. Fearing exposure, he underestimated Monique's resolve and Marcus's hidden networks. Monique, with Anya's guidance, sent the coded response Onyx confirmed, deliver. The next day, a package arrived at a prearranged dead drop location. A locker in a forgotten train station, inside. A burner phone and a small, unlabeled data chip. The phone contained a single, encrypted message. The truth will out. For Monique. Anya and Chloe worked tirelessly, verifying the authenticity of the files. What they found was explosive. Not just individual documents, but a systematic, top-down strategy. There were internal emails instructing PR teams to focus on Marcus Taylor's radical history, emphasize his military discharge, and frame his actions as premeditated assault, not defensive. There were specific directives to leak doctored footage and to feed anonymous sources fabricated stories. Even more damning were the internal memos detailing a soft suppression protocol for public dissent, including monitoring online activity and using citizen informants to spread counter-narratives. It laid bare the department's chillingly efficient machinery of deception. Monique, her voice still hoarse from the hospital, made the call to a national news anchor known for his investigative journalism. She didn't just give them the files. She gave them the story of how they were obtained, hinting at a whistleblower from within. This isn't just about one bad cop, she told him, her voice ringing with newfound strength. This is about the department actively lying to the public, manipulating the narrative to destroy a black veteran who dared to defend his family. They tried to break us. We're going to expose them. The story broke like a dam. The raw video of Hansen's kick was devastating, but the newly leaked internal documents were catastrophic. They showed not just an abusive officer, but a corrupt system actively engaged in a cover-up in a smear campaign. The public outrage, already high, became a raging inferno. The media, which had wavered, swung decisively. Headlines screamed of police conspiracy and systematic deception. The attention shifted from Marcus's alleged radicalism to the calculated criminality of the police department. The department, which had been on the offensive, was now scrambling, caught utterly off guard by the precision and timing of the leak. Their counter-offensive had been systematically undermined, turning their own tactics against them. The city crackled with unrest. Protests erupted. The leaked documents, revealing the police department's systematic cover-up and smear campaign, had detonated like a bomb. The public, already outraged by the video of Monique's assault, was now incandescent with fury at the institutional deception. The police department, desperate to staunch the bleeding, announced an emergency press conference at their headquarters. It was a thinly veiled attempt to regain control, to spin a narrative of transparency while simultaneously preparing for an internal purge. Monique, still bruised but unbowed, arrived in a wheelchair, flanked by Anya Sharma and Chloe Davis. Her presence was a calculated move, a living embodiment of the injustice that the department sought to bury. Her face, pale but resolute, was broadcast live on every major news network. A sea of cameras, reporters, and an agitated crowd had gathered, pushing against the barricades. The air was thick with tension, a palpable sense of impending explosion. Chief Anderson, a man whose career was now teetering on the brink, stepped to the podium, his face a mask of forced gravitas. "We are here today," he began, his voice strained, "to address the recent allegations and to assure the public of our unwavering commitment to justice and accountability." He spoke of isolated incidents, misunderstandings, and ongoing internal investigations. He carefully avoided mentioning Officer Hansen by name or the specifically leaked documents. He even hinted at external influences attempting to destabilize the department, a clear jab at Marcus. As Anderson droned on, a sudden ripple went through the crowd. A side door to the precinct building opened, and Officer Derek Hansen was escorted out, ostensibly for transfer to another facility, but clearly as a staged act of transparency. He was uncuffed, but two burly internal affairs officers flanked him, guiding him through a back corridor towards a waiting unmarked car. Hansen, his face tight with barely suppressed rage, caught sight of Monique. His eyes, full of contempt, met hers. At that precise moment, Chloe Davis, anticipating this display, leaned into her microphone, her voice cutting through the chief's prepared statement. "Chief Anderson, can you confirm Officer Hansen's immediate suspension and internal disciplinary action regarding his assault on Monique Taylor? Given the overwhelming video evidence and the leaked internal documents exposing a department-wide cover-up strategy, the directness of the question, the mention of the leaked files, hit Anderson like a physical blow. He faltered, his prepared speech abandoning him before he could recover. Anya Sharma stepped forward, placing a hand on Monique's shoulder. Monique, gathering her strength, pushed herself slightly forward in her wheelchair, her gaze fixed on Hansen. "Chief Anderson speaks of accountability." Monique's voice, amplified by Chloe's mic, resonated across the square, cutting through the murmuring crowd. Her voice was steady, unwavering, despite the pain. "But what about Officer Hansen, the man who kicked a pregnant woman on public street, and whose department then tried to destroy the evidence and discredit my husband?" She pointed directly at Hansen, who had frozen mid-stride, his face contorting into a mask of pure fury. "Is this your accountability, Chief, parading him past the cameras while charging my husband, Marcus Taylor, with assaulting an officer he didn't even touch?" Hansen, witnessing Monique's direct accusation, snapped. His carefully constructed composure shattered. He lunged forward, shaking off the internal affairs officers, his eyes blazing with hatred. "You lying," he roared, storming towards Monique, his fists clenched. "He's a radical. He attacked me. You're all." The internal affairs officers scrambled to restrain him, but Hansen was a man possessed, his rage blinding him. He struggled violently, swinging his arms, roaring obscenities. The cameras, which had been aimed at Chief Anderson, swung wildly to capture the raw, unscripted chaos. News anchors, broadcasting live, stammered, unsure how to react to the unprecedented public meltdown. "Get him back! Get him back!" Chief Anderson shouted, his face ashen, his controlled narrative dissolving into absolute pandemonium. The press conference became a brawl, a frantic struggle between furious internal affairs officers and a rogue cop, his racist venom now exposed for the entire world to see. Hansen's uncontrolled outburst, broadcast live, confirmed every accusation, every leaked detail. It was raw, undeniable proof of his instability and the department's attempt to cover it up. As Hansen was finally subdued and dragged back into the building, still shouting threats, the power shifted irrevocably. The images were undeniable, a chief losing control. An officer's public meltdown. Monique, sitting calmly, her expression one of quiet resolve, became the undisputed victor of the information war. The department's last-ditch attempt to control the narrative had backfired spectacularly, turning their press conference into a public spectacle of their own corruption and Hansen's unhinged brutality. The cheers of the crowd, now a deafening roar, cemented the verdict the public had spoken. The explosive confrontation at the press conference ignited a firestorm that engulfed the entire city. Chief Anderson's career ended abruptly. He resigned under immense pressure, a scapegoat for a systemic rot that went deeper than one officer. Officer Derek Hansen was not just suspended. He was formally charged with aggravated assault and excessive force. The live-streamed video of his meltdown sealing his fate. The district attorney, sensing the overwhelming public sentiment and armed with the leaked internal documents, moved swiftly. The charges against Marcus Taylor were dismissed. The evidence of his assault deemed fabricated. He was released, a free man, a symbol of resilience. Monique and Marcus reunited, a quiet, tearful embrace amidst the lingering chaos. But their fight was far from over. The individual arrests and resignations were merely surface scratches. The leaked internal documents hinted at a deeper, pervasive culture of racism and corruption within the police department, a system that protected its own regardless of the cost to the public. They had exposed a bad cop, but the machine that enabled him remained. Marcus, now free, went to work. He leveraged his network of contacts from his SIGINT days, a shadowy collective of ethical hackers, data analysts, and former intelligence operatives. He had shown Hansen the tip of the iceberg. Now he was going to expose the whole frozen mass. He wasn't looking for revenge, but for systemic change, a dismantling of the racist infrastructure embedded within the department. Anya Sharma, the human rights lawyer, filed a landmark civil lawsuit against the police department, not just for Monique's assault, but for a pattern of civil rights violations, using the leaked documents as her primary evidence. Chloe Davis, the investigative journalist, launched a full-scale expose, a series of in-depth articles that peeled back the layers of departmental corruption, unearthing stories of racial profiling, planted evidence, and silenced whistleblowers. The public was hungry for justice, and Monique and Marcus became their reluctant champions. The police department, now under interim leadership, responded with a desperate counterattack. They launched an internal investigation into the leak itself, a witch hunt aimed at Officer Miller, the whistleblower. They also attempted to discredit Anya Sharma, spreading rumors of her radical leanings and anti-police agenda, but the momentum had shifted. The public no longer trusted their narrative. The well was poisoned for the department, not for the victims. The true test came during the preliminary hearings for Monique's civil suit. The department's legal team, notorious for their aggressive tactics, brought in their top defense attorney, a formidable figure known for demolishing plaintiffs. Their strategy was to portray Monique as a disgruntled citizen seeking a payout, and Marcus as a dangerous hacker. They tried to paint the entire movement as an attack on law enforcement, undermining public safety. But Marcus had prepared for this. He had anticipated their every move. During the hearing, when the defense attorney presented heavily redacted internal reports to discredit Marcus, Marcus smiled faintly. "Your Honor," he addressed the judge, his voice calm. "With all due respect, those documents are incomplete. I believe the full, unredacted versions would tell a very different story." The defense attorney scoffed. "And how would you know that?" "Mr. Taylor," Marcus's eyes flickered to the judge, then to the defense team. "Because I just released them. Live." A quiet hum filled the courtroom as phones buzzed. Marcus, working with his network, had exploited a vulnerability in the court's own network security, a backdoor he had discovered and kept hidden. He had not hacked their personal devices, but simply accessed the specific public-facing server where the court documents were typically uploaded after being officially submitted. A second later, the unredacted documents, along with a trove of other internal files that exposed even more widespread corruption within the department, including evidence of a slush fund used to pay off victims and silence internal dissenters, were instantly accessible online. He had planned this, waiting for the precise moment when the defense would attempt to mislead the court with partial information. The documents revealed systematic racial profiling, quotas for arrests in minority neighborhoods, and a code of silence enforced through intimidation. The courtroom erupted. The judge, initially stunned, banged his gavel furiously. The defense team looked utterly horrified. Their strategy in ruins, the prosecutor, who had been struggling against the department's stonewalling, looked at Marcus with a mixture of shock and awe. The leak wasn't just a revelation, it was an act of audacious defiance, a public dismantling of power. The impact was immediate. The court case was adjourned as the new evidence sent shockwaves through the legal system. The police department faced not just a civil lawsuit, but a federal investigation into systemic corruption. Officer Miller, initially a target, was now protected as a key witness. The narrative was irreversibly altered. Monique and Marcus, once victims, became architects of change, symbols of resistance against institutional injustice. Their quiet revenge was not about violence, but about truth, strategically weaponized and delivered with precision, ensuring that the oppressor, caught in their own web of lies, would be maneuvered into a final, inescapable trap of public and legal scrutiny. The city began to believe that true justice might finally be within reach. The unredacted documents, unleashed by Marcus, shattered the remaining defenses of the police department. The federal investigation, initially a slow burn, became a raging inferno. It wasn't just a handful of bad apples. It was a rot that permeated the roots of the institution. Officer Miller, now an official whistleblower, provided damning testimony, detailing internal directives, cover-ups, and the systematic racial bias embedded in training and operations. The department's desperate attempts to discredit him only solidified his credibility. The civil lawsuit brought by Monique became a public spectacle. The prosecution's case against Officer Hansen was undeniable. The raw footage of the kick, combined with the comprehensive internal documents proving a deliberate attempt to malign Monique and Marcus, left him no room for escape. His defense, based on resisting arrest, crumbled under the weight of the evidence. Hansen, now a pariah, faced not just public contempt, but the very real prospect of a long prison sentence. The final showdown wasn't in a dark alley or a tense interrogation room. It unfolded in the stark, unforgiving light of the courtroom, and on the national news. Monique, now moving with a cane but her spirit unbroken, delivered her victim impact statement. She didn't recount the pain, she recounted the betrayal. She spoke of the trust shattered, the fear for her unborn child, and the insidious campaign to destroy her husband's reputation. Her voice, clear and unwavering, resonated with an undeniable truth. Officer Hansen didn't just kick me, she stated, her gaze fixed on the disgraced officer. He kicked every citizen who believes in justice, and his department tried to silence the truth. Marcus, seated beside her, watched Hansen's face. The smug defiance had been replaced by a hollow desperation. The arrogance, once so pronounced, had withered into a pathetic shell. He was no longer the imposing officer. He was a broken man, stripped bare of his authority and his carefully constructed lies. The jury's verdict came swiftly guilty on all counts for Hansen. The federal investigation, armed with Marcus's digital insights and Miller's testimony, led to a cascade of indictments within the police department. High-ranking officials, complicit in the cover-ups and the systematic racial profiling, were arrested. The slush fund used to silence victims was exposed, leading to further charges of embezzlement and obstruction of justice. The very foundations of the department, built on decades of unchecked power and systemic racism, began to crack. The final unexpected twist came with the sentencing of Officer Hansen. Instead of the typical prison sentence, the judge, citing the overwhelming public interest and the need for accountability, ordered Hansen to undertake a public service project. His sentence included a mandated period of community service, working in a program dedicated to educating police recruits on de-escalation tactics and implicit bias, a program overseen by a newly formed civilian oversight board that Monique and Marcus helped establish. It was a poetic form of justice, forcing the architect of violence to dismantle the very system he had embodied. Hansen, stripped of his badge and his power, was forced to confront the consequences of his actions as in the most direct and humiliating way. Monique and Marcus did not seek the spotlight, but it found them. They became powerful advocates for police reform, their story a rallying cry for communities across the nation. Marcus, utilizing his formidable tech skills, launched an open-source platform for citizens to securely report police misconduct, creating a digital repository of evidence that bypassed official channels. Monique, now a mother, spoke eloquently about the need for accountability and transparency, her voice resonating with a quiet strength that inspired millions. Their revenge wasn't loud or violent. It was methodical, strategic, and utterly devastating to the system that had sought to crush them. They had turned chaos into momentum, exposing a deep vein of corruption and forcing a reckoning. The city, once consumed by outrage, began a slow, painful process of healing and reform. The image of a pregnant black woman, kicked to the ground, transformed into a symbol of fierce resistance, and the husband who had once been a ghost in the machine became the architect of its dismantling, ushering in an era where power shifts, truth prevails, and true justice, however painstakingly achieved, becomes a possibility. The fight wasn't over, but the turning point had been reached, and the oppressors had been outmaneuvered. Their reign of impunity ended by the quiet, unyielding defiance of two ordinary people who refused to be broken.